It's a great pleasure for me to invite you all this evening to the J.R.D. Tata Lecture. It's an annual event of the TIFR Alumni Association. I am highly privileged, greatly honored to welcome our speaker today. He's known as Chris Gopalakrishnan. The full name is Senapati Gopalakrishnan, but everybody knows him as Chris and refers to him as Chris. And it's actually, we are very grateful that he accepted this invitation to come and speak to us on this occasion. And so may I now request Professor Sandeep Trivedi, Director TIFR, and Professor Dipan Ghosh, President of the Alumni Association, to accompany Mr. Gopalakrishnan to the dais. So we're still waiting for people to come in, but I think we can start out the proceedings. So may I first request Professor Trivedi to say a few words about the public lectures in general and the J.R.D. Tata lecture especially, and also share his thoughts on his association with TIFR.
Thank you very much, Ravi. So good evening to all of you here, my dear colleagues and friends, students, and especially visitors we have today from outside of the TIFR community. A very warm welcome to you. Today is indeed a very special occasion. Every year we celebrate the birth of Mr. J.R.D. Tata with a lecture, and we are indeed privileged this evening to have with us Mr. Chris Gopalakrishnan to deliver this year's J.R.D. Annual Lecture, J.R.D. Tata Annual Lecture. I'll just say a few words about Mr. J.R.D. Tata. I think many of you know that TIFR was started due to the vision of three extraordinary individuals. Dr. Homi Bhabha, of course, who was our founding director and a scientist of great repute. Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, India's first visionary prime minister. And Mr. J.R.D. Tata, a truly extraordinary industrialist and visionary in his own right. I'll be quite honest with you, I wasn't aware of Mr. Tata's full contributions towards TIFR until I became director myself. But when I became director, I had the opportunity to look back at many of the minutes of the TIFR Council of Management, which is the apex body that regulates the functioning of TIFR, and which Mr. Tata chaired for many, many years. And I was really struck by the depth of his involvement, often in really minutiae details about the running of our institute. And it is clear from that record that he had a very passionate interest in science and a very passionate interest in TIFR as an organization which stood for excellence in science and technology. And he felt that this kind of an organization was very essential, as did Dr. Bhabha and Pandit Nehru, for taking India forward. So it's indeed a very special occasion for us every year. I am very thankful to the TIFR Alumni Association for organizing this lecture, which is an opportunity for all of us to both remember Mr. Tata and also have the opportunity to hear a very leading figure and their thoughts every year. And this year we are indeed privileged to have Mr. Gopalakrishnan with us. I think many of you know that he is one of the co-founders of Infosys, a company which has really brought, I think, a great deal of pride to India. It's one of the real success stories of India in the field of technology, computers, and so on. And so I think it's really very apt that we have him here with us on the occasion of Mr. Tata's birthday celebration this year to share his thoughts with us. And so with that, I leave you. I think we are in for a very interesting lecture and evening, and welcome you again to this evening's lecture. Thank you.
So I invite Sandeep to formally welcome our speaker today. Yeah. So I'll now request Professor Dipan Ghosh, our president, to talk about the Alumni Association, its activities, and introduce the speaker.
Honorable Chief Guest, Mr. Gopalakrishnan, Professor Trivedi, Professor Ravindra Kumar, and ladies and gentlemen. Just before we came here, we had a short meeting with Krish Gopalakrishnan over tea, and he was telling us, I was explaining to him that ours is a very small organization. That's because in the traditional sense of producing alumni, because TIFR has been an institute which produces primarily PhDs, we obviously don't have that many to sort of compete with, let's say, the IITs. Then he told us that it's not important how many you are. You have to get the TIFR Alumni Association to bring out the inherent strength of this institute and be connected with all the alumni that actually have passed out of this great institute. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Mr. Senapati Krish Gopalakrishnan. It is indeed a name which has been known since 1993 to the people of this country, because he, along with 5 or 6 others, brought in a revolution in this country which actually ushered in the technology age for this country. In fact, it is interesting that we have a speaker of Infosys to talk about Tata, which is probably the biggest competitor to the Infosys today, namely the Tata Consultancy Services, of course. To give you a brief introduction, Mr. Senapati Krish Gopalakrishnan is the chairman of Axelar Ventures, an accelerator that helps startups during the early stages of their business journey. Krish served as the vice chairman of Infosys from 2011 to 2014, and the chief executive officer and the managing director of Infosys from 2007 to 2011. As our director pointed out, he is one of the co-founders of Infosys Technology. Recognized as a global business and technology thought leader, he was voted the top CEO in the IT services category in Institutional Investors' inaugural ranking of Asia's top executives, and selected as one of the winners of the second Asian Corporate Director Recognition Award by Corporate Governance Asia in 2011. He was also selected to Thinkers 50, an elite list of global business thinkers, in 2009. He was elected President of Indian Apex Industry Chamber, Confederation of Indian Industry CII for 2013-14, and served as the co-chair of the World Economic Forum at Davos in January 14. In January 2011, the Government of India awarded Mr. Gopalakrishnan with Padma Bhushan, the country's 3rd highest civilian honor. Mr. Gopalakrishnan serves on the board of governors of his own alma mater, namely the Indian Institute of Technology Madras, board of governors of Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology. He is the chairman of BOG of IIIT Bangalore. He is the chairman of the Vision Group on Information Technology of Karnataka government and the chairman of CII Startup Council. Coming back to his education, you would all be glad to know he actually holds a master's degree in physics, which is, of course, an institute, this institute is most well known for. And of course, he also has a degree in computer science, and both from IIT Madras. And he has been telling us how he started the alumni movement for the IIT Madras back in the late 90s. He is a fellow of Indian National Academy of Engineers and is an honorary fellow of Institution of Electronics and Telecommunication Engineers of India. I am told that this lecture is being broadcast live on Chai and Why under its Facebook webpage. And ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to present Mr. Krish Gopalakrishnan. Thank you, sir.
So over to you.
Thank you very much for that nice introduction, and thank you for inviting me for this lecture. It's an honor and a privilege for me to deliver the 2018 TIFR JRD Tata Public Lecture. Since it was mentioned that TCS is a competitor for Infosys, let me give you something that happened at Infosys. So we moved to our new campus in Electronic City way back around 94, 95, and probably around 2000, we built a new corporate block for the top leadership to sit. We have a management council conference room where all the top leadership meet almost a weekly or a monthly basis, state-of-the-art room, etc. And we decided to name that room after JRD Tata. And Mr. Ratan Tata graciously came and inaugurated that room for us. So in the industry, we actually have respect for each other, work very closely. In fact, I would say, if you look at the success of the IT industry, it's because of our ability to compete and collaborate that has made what the IT industry is. We respect each other, so the competition is fierce but fair. And I think that's what is needed to build a global industry. So I said, it's an honor and privilege because this lecture is named after TIFR, India's preeminent science research institute, and JRD Tata, who was an iconic Indian industrialist and philanthropist. JRD Tata is an inspiration to all Indians. Sandeep talked about his deep involvement with TIFR. He was instrumental in encouraging Professor Homi Bhabha, I believe, to start TIFR. JRD Tata was at the forefront of India's mission mode programs in science and technology. He was a member of the Atomic Energy Commission for 26 years from its inception. JRD Tata is credited with inclusion of nuclear science as a research area in Atomic Energy Commission. He was also instrumental in its translation into applications that benefited Indian citizens. So the Tata Memorial Hospital is a pioneer in using nuclear medicine in Asia and one of the leading centers in the world treating cancer. JRD Tata became the president of the Court of the Indian Institute of Science in 1955 and was president for 38 years. This laid the foundation for IISc, becoming a globally ranked university of repute today. JRD Tata continued the tradition of Jamsetji Tata in an important era where a newly independent India was on a path of modernization by leveraging the power of science and technology. So that's why, it's an honor and a privilege for me to get an invitation to come and talk to you today. So in this lecture, I will share my thoughts on science, technology, and knowledge. Because I believe, ultimately, science and technology will have to be converted to knowledge for the benefit of society, and that's why, I term this title as Science, Technology, and Knowledge. Now, we have come a long way since our species, the Homo sapiens, first made an appearance almost 200,000 years ago. The first discoveries and inventions that we associate with our species actually predates that. Evidence points to the fact that the stone tools were first introduced by Australopithecus africanus, kind of tongue twister, about 3.4 million years ago. And fire was first controlled by Homo erectus about 600,000 years ago. So our journey in science discovery, etc., started way, way, way back from actually the beginning. The most interesting phase of the history of our species is arguably the last 500 years that coincides with the start of the modern scientific revolution in the mid-16th century. I believe the watershed was the publication of Nicholas Copernicus on the revolutions of the heavenly spheres, a seminal work on the heliocentric theory in 1543. Ever since the advent of the modern scientific revolution, we have seen a fundamental transformation in scientific ideas across mathematical, physical, and biological sciences. The scientific revolution has powered the rapid societal and economic progress and the growth of institutions like universities that continue to be the centers of scientific research and education. While the basic framework of scientific inquiry, discoveries, and inventions laid out during the modern scientific revolution still applies, science and technology disciplines have evolved and adapted over the years. I will discuss the trends in science, technology, and the resultant knowledge that are emerging today. In 2016, the paper on gravitational waves, observation of gravitational waves from a binary black hole merger by scientists associated with the LIGO project was announced, and that announced the detection of gravitational waves was published. Apart from the stellar scientific impact, the involvement of over 1,000 scientists from over 90 institutions from many countries, including India, captured public imagination. While LIGO is an extreme case of big science that had $1 billion budget, the trend of increased international collaboration in science is asecular. According to one recent study, the number of multiple author scientific research publications with collaborators from more than one country more than doubled from 1990 to 2015, from 10% to 20%. So increased international collaboration. Not only is research becoming global, it's also becoming multidisciplinary. A report in Nature mentions that the percentage of research papers in science and engineering with reference to other disciplines increased from about 20% in 1980 to about 35% in 2010. Interestingly, a 2015 study by Elsevier notes that authors from India are among the most prolific in publishing interdisciplinary papers. Even when you look at a young domain of science like neuroscience, you will see this effect here. Neuroscience is a science that combines, of course, psychology, anatomy, molecular biology, development biology, cytology, mathematical modeling, computer science, electrical and other engineering sciences, and psychology to understand the fundamental and emergent properties of neurons and neural circuits. So by definition, neuroscience is multidisciplinary. Modern multidisciplinary neuroscience traces its origin to the neuroscience research program, weaving biology, chemistry, physics, and mathematics, started within the biology department at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in the 1950s. So fast forward, the leading information technology of today is AI, that is artificial intelligence, and ML, which is machine learning. And this was inspired by the research of neuroscientists done about 3 decades ago. So it is interesting to note that AI and ML have come a full circle today and are the tools that neuroscience scientists use to analyze brain imaging data more efficiently. AI and ML are helping speed up the analysis in many other scientific disciplines as well. So LIGO is another example where detection of new classes of gravitational wave sources are enabled using AI and machine learning. So AI and ML are new tools that we have. These are technologies that made rapid advances recently, though introduced many years back, but they have now found application in many other disciplines. Ever since the advent of steam engine in 1765, we have witnessed a continuous stream of technology inventions that have improved human productivity. According to a report by Barclays analysts, if human productivity was 100 units in 1765, it is now increased to 3,000 units today. In fact, the last 5 decades has seen an increase in human productivity from about 1,500 units to 3,000 units. And this steep increase coincides with the adoption of IT, including personal computing, software, internet, email, mobile communication, etc. I believe that AI and ML follow in that impactful list. Now, why AI and ML are likely to impact our lives in fundamental ways in the near future, these are not without biases. Till recently, the general reason for bias was thought to be the fact that the IT research and industry community are predominantly male and socio-culturally homogeneous. However, a recent study from Stanford reveals something more fundamental. ML algorithms may be learning from society's deep-rooted biases. This study used word embedding to measure changes in gender and ethnic stereotypes over the past century in the United States. Word embedding is a class of algorithms that convert a word into a vector and maps it in a multi-dimensional space. Vectors closer together represent words that are closely associated with each other. For example, vectors for mainframe and computer would be nearer to one another compared to vectors for mainframe and microwave. The study found that adjectives such as intelligent, logical, and thoughtful were associated more with men in the first half of the 20th century. Since 1960s, the same words have increasingly been associated with women in every subsequent decade. Interestingly, in 1910, the adjective commonly used for women were charming, placid, delicate, etc. By 1950, the list included new adjectives such as soft, childish, colorless, etc. And by 1990, older adjectives gave way to newer adjectives like maternal, caring, protective, etc. So you can see, the biases that are there. So this reveals an immediate need to focus on important social aspects of emerging technologies like AI and ML. Why it is important to be more diverse while selecting AI and ML professionals, we also need to work on methods that try to caution us about the inherent biases in the data used to train AI and ML systems. One solution may be to explore assigning weights to the different data sources used to train AI and ML systems. This may need to be more sophisticated than older the data, lesser the weight, and include data from multiple sources from multiple countries. And this is again why I believe research has to be global, and India must participate. Apart from inherent biases, we also need to carefully look at use cases where emerging technologies like AI and ML are being used. I'm just using AI and ML because I'm familiar with problems in computer science. I'm sure most of us have watched the 2002 Hollywood blockbuster Minority Report, which depicted a future in 2054 where pre-crime, a specialized police department apprehends criminals based on foreknowledge provided by 3 psychics called precogs. Well, this context is closer to reality. AI and ML are assisting humans in judicial decision making. Last year, a man in Wisconsin, USA, was sentenced to a 6-year prison term based on a report generated by a private proprietary software whose ML algorithm was unavailable for inspection. ML algorithms are increasingly becoming integral to human life and impacting our daily lives. They're making decisions by analyzing and interpreting the analysis of the prolific amounts of data that we and our gadgets are generating. From the mundane, like what route we need to take to reach our destination, to more serious life-saving contexts of helping doctors choose an appropriate cancer therapy. It's imperative that the ML algorithms we design are robust. In spite of these challenges, I remain hopeful that we will overcome them. As with many technologies in the past, there was always a threat new technologies pose to humans. We have been resilient and ensured that these technologies, by and large, were ultimately used for the greater benefit of humanity. So one useful reference to examine the beneficial impact of new development in science and technology is to study the continuum of industrial revolution. The first industrial revolution took place in the 18th to 19th century in Europe and America. It was a period when mostly agrarian and rural societies became industrial and urban. The iron and textile industries, along with the development of steam engine, played central roles in the first industrial revolution. The second industrial revolution took place between 1870 and 1914. It was a period of growth for iron and textile industries and expansion of new ones such as oil and electricity. This era witnessed the use of electric power to create mass production. The major technological advances in this era include telephone, light bulbs, phonograph, and internal combustion engine. The third industrial revolution refers to the advancement of technology from analog, electric, and mechanical devices to the digital technology available today. The era started during the late 60s, early 70s, and is still ongoing. Advancements during this era include personal computer, internet, mobile phone. Now we are at the beginning of the fourth industrial revolution. It's an emerging era powered by the current advances in science and technology. It's characterized by the fusion of technologies that blurring the lines between physical, digital, and biological domains. So a question that comes to our mind is, what is the use of scientific discoveries, technological inventions, and knowledge gained thereof to humanity across the continuum of industrial revolutions? While progress in better understanding the universe and how things in the universe work is an important goal in itself, it's also important to translate the impact of science and technology to tangible societal and economic benefits for a larger population, especially if you want to get support for science and technology from the larger population. One of the fundamental measures of societal progress is global average life expectancy at birth. According to various estimates, the global average life expectancy in the world was about 32 years in 1800. 32 years in 1800. By 2012, the global average life expectancy went up to about 70 years. What is impressive is that the population of the world has increased from 1 billion in 1800 to about 7 billion in 2012. Humans are not only living longer, but are also economically better off in general. According to data from studies by the World Bank, the percentage of world's population living in poverty based on purchasing power parity units has decreased from 94% in 1820 to 9.8% in 2015. In absolute numbers, there are less number of people living in poverty in the world in 2015 in absolute numbers than in 1820, despite a 7x growth in world's population. What are the economic benefits of science and technology? Let's visualize the world's GDP in trillions of international dollars on the x-axis of the graph. Let's assume on the y-axis of the graph, let's assume the y-axis goes from 0 at the origin to 127 trillion international dollars, the current world's GDP. Let's denote time on the x-axis. Let the origin of the x-axis denote 8000 BCE, about the time humans started farming, so the agriculture revolution. And let's extend the x-axis to 2018, that is today. The graph of world's GDP versus year, for most part, is a line hugging the x-axis. This reveals the increased step change in the world's economic activity that has been spurred by advances in science and technology from the turn of the 20th century, including advances in information technology. So only at the turn of the 20th century does this graph start to spike vertically upward. That's why this reveals the increased step change in the world's economic activity that has been spurred by advances in science and technology from the turn of the 20th century. In fact, the vertical spike becomes pronounced only after 1950, when computers started being adopted in industry and government. While science and technology lead to societal and economic progress, there are important questions that we may have to answer sooner than later. Some of these questions are becoming more relevant in the context of recent progress in AI and ML. While artificial general intelligence, that is human-like intelligence, is still only an aspirational goal, it may be prudent for us to deliberate on what it all means for furthering human knowledge. I.J. Good, chief statistician of Turing's code-breaking team, wrote in 1965, "Let an ultra-intelligent machine be defined as a machine that can surpass all the intelligent activities of any man, however clever. Since the design of machines is one of these intellectual activities, an ultra-intelligent machine would design even better machines. There would then unquestionably be an intelligence explosion, because now the machine is able to create more intelligent machines. And the intelligence of man would be left far behind. Thus, the first ultra-intelligent machine will be the last invention that man need ever make, provided that the machine is docile enough to tell us how to keep it under control." So this was I.J. Good in 1965. So does this mean scientific and technology progress will at some point in time be left in the hands of ultra-intelligent machines? Only time will tell if human knowledge will and can be entrusted to machines. Human knowledge is at an exciting cusp today. In the book Critical Path, futurist and inventor Buckminster Fuller estimated that if we took all the knowledge that mankind has accumulated and transmitted by the year 1 CE as equal to 1 unit of information, it probably took 1500 years until the 16th century for that amount of knowledge to double. The next doubling of knowledge from 2 to 4 units was completed in 250 years by the mid-18th century. By the turn of the 20th century, 150 years later, human knowledge had doubled again to 8 units. The speed at which information doubled was getting faster and faster. The doubling speed is now estimated between 1 and 2 years. So how do humans handle such an exponential growth in knowledge? Ray Kurzweil, an American futurist, predicts that within decades, humans will transcend biology and maybe increasingly getting fused with machines. He believes that there will be a point called the singularity when technological change propelled by the explosive growth in artificial intelligence will accelerate past the point of current human comprehension. While we ponder on the larger philosophical implications, let us look at what has brought us to this cusp. Among the countries that have leveraged science and technology for the benefit of their citizens, USA stands out. USA has taken the center stage in harnessing the latest advances in science and technology from turn of 20th century. While the university, industry, military complex in the US powered science and technology from World War I till the end of Cold War, the university startup complex has been in the forefront of powering science and technology in recent years. The digital computer and internet are applications from the university, industry, military complex era. And web search, social networking, software as a service, the current AI, ML developments that we are seeing are applications of the university startup complex. The central theme of successive US science and technology policy makers from the era of World War I has been to turn to their scientists and technologists in their universities to solve problems of national importance. The university, industry, military complex era traces back to the pioneering efforts of Professor Vannevar Bush of MIT, who took multiple roles in the government to build a strong science and technology ecosystem in the 1940s. One of Professor Bush's students, Professor Frederick Terman of Stanford University, is credited with the startup culture in what is now known as the Silicon Valley. He was instrumental in setting up the Stanford Industrial Park in 1945, which is now the famous Stanford Research Park. It's one of the most mimicked organizations across the world. He encouraged his students, William Hewlett and David Packard, to start HP in 1947, and that started the Silicon Valley. The investments that the USA made in science and technology from the turn of the 20th century generated increased economic activity. New American companies powered by scientific and technological knowledge dominate the list of most valuable companies by market capitalization. The list of companies, however, has seen a churn in the past decades. Again, this churn is driven by the entrepreneurial activity spurred by new science and technological advances. For example, in 1967, the top 5 American companies by market capitalization were IBM, AT&T, Eastman Kodak, General Motors, and Standard Oil. By 2017, this list was very different. It had Apple, Alphabet, that's the parent company of Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and Facebook, all IT or knowledge-driven companies, and all at the forefront of creating new technologies and knowledge, including in the fields like AI and ML. It's interesting to note that none of the companies in 2017 list existed 50 years back in 1967. Facebook, the youngest, was founded in 2004. Today, USA has the most vibrant startup ecosystem that continues the tradition of the university startup complex and that continues to spawn deep technology startups. Deep technology startups are often built on unique, differentiated, hard-to-reproduce technological and scientific advances. These startups typically have a strong connection to university research labs. Now I'm going to switch to the Indian context. It is heartening to note that India is continuing on the path of nurturing science and technology advancement and using the resultant knowledge for the benefit of its citizens. However, there is more that should be done. I believe that one of the important policy changes that India should adopt is to increase the R&D spend from the current 0.8% of GDP to at least 3%. In comparison, USA spends 2.7%. Private funding has played an important role in the transformation of emerging nations. For example, in the mid-2000s, about 65% of Taiwan's R&D was from private sector funding, up from 30% in the past. India is at a point in history where private funding can supplement government funding in research, and this includes philanthropy. This may be the time to tweak the current rules on corporate social responsibility that mandates 2% of average net profit be spent on specified social activities. What if instead 1% of such funds can be used to fund science and technology results that shape our future? Let us now reflect back on our contemporary history on how we have leveraged science and technology for our development. India too had a visionary like Professor Bush, and that I believe is none other than Professor Homi Bhabha. Apart from being a main architect of building India's science and technology capabilities in the decades that immediately followed our independence, Professor Homi Bhabha was also instrumental to leverage the knowledge from science and technology to enable India become self-sufficient, self-reliant in strategic sectors. In fact, one can trace back India's IT journey to Professor Homi Bhabha. It was Professor Bhabha's foresight that propelled India to become one of the few countries to design and build a digital computer in 1960, which was formally commissioned in 1962. It's none other than the TIFRAC, built by Professor R. Narasimhan, Professor P.V.S. Rao, and the team here at TIFR. While IIT Kanpur was the pioneer in computer science education in India in the mid-1960s, TIFR's, I think initially it was called National Center for Software Development and Computing Techniques, NCSDCT, and later I think NCST. Then IIT Madras and IISc soon followed. Now, this is just a PR from my side. For those interested in knowing more about the history and evolution of Indian IT, please download the Itihasa app, and you will find interviews, video interviews from late Professor M.G.K. Menon, Professor P.V.S. Rao, Professor Ramani, Professor Shyam Sundar, who reminisce the role of TIFR in India's IT revolution. The genesis and early growth of the IT industry in India can be traced to the alumni of IITs, IISc, TIFR, like NCST. Two of the largest Indian IT companies, TCS and Infosys, are the result of the knowledge and the human capital created by this Indian educational and research ecosystem. So again, we have created a $170 billion industry, exports of $130 billion. It contributes 8% of Indian GDP, and it's a result of our investment in education, science, research, etc. An important spillover of the success of the Indian IT industry is that it has inspired entrepreneurial activity in India over the past couple of decades. And the first generation of entrepreneurial entities were like Infosys, Wipro, etc. Then the second wave was Mindtree, the third wave, the Flipkarts of the world, the e-commerce companies, etc. And I think this will continue over the next several years. The Indian venture capitalists are also realizing the importance of deep technology startups and are setting up dedicated funds that focus on areas like AI, ML, virtual reality, augmented reality, drones, robotics, blockchain, biotech, etc. In fact, India is building an active angel investor and early stage VC ecosystem. And it's estimated that the angel investment in India was about $250 million. And this is now growing to around $500 million. So I think we are in interesting times. I believe that we need to do more, and that's why I said that we need to increase our spending on research and development. To conclude, I believe that as Indians, we should continue to foster knowledge generated by research and application of science technology. We should also sustain and grow institutions that nurture science and technology, that are the fountainheads of scientific and technological knowledge. It is in these vibrant institutions that our scientists and technologists, especially our young scientists, make discoveries and inventions that can better every Indian's life. We should link these institutions to the startup ecosystem and should increase the funding for research. But last but not the least, we should fund promising deep tech startups. J.D. Tata's prescient words ring loud and clear. In the presidential address at the first General Assembly of the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, J.D. Tata said, "No institute of science and technology can guarantee discoveries or inventions, and we cannot plan or command a work of genius at will. But do we give sufficient thought to the nurture of the young investigator, to providing the right atmosphere and conditions of work, and full opportunity for development? It is these that foster invention and discovery." And let me add, this will actually spur economic growth of the country. Thank you very much. Sure.
So a few questions, if you have. I have two volunteers who will go around with the mics, so please speak into the mic. And we have about, 5-10 minutes maybe?
I'm okay. You
Sure,
tell me.
okay. Yeah. Thanks. Questions, comments, anything is welcome. Yeah, there.
No, this should work. No?
Oh, yeah, that should work.
Yeah,
True.
go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Gopalakrishnan, so we have been at the bottom end of the chain, from what I hear, in the IT industry business about 10-15 years ago. I remember a lot of people coming in during the 1999 so-called crisis that the Windows system had to go through into the US to solve some of the problems. What is your view on going ahead of it so that we are not bottom feeders, but we are accessing the top parts of the fruit trees?
Okay, so any industry is divided into multiple segments. Okay, Indian IT industry is in the segment called consulting and IT services. Okay, and then there is products, and there are now SaaS and cloud service providers. So there are different segments in any industry. Now, if you look at the consulting and the IT services industry, consulting in IT and IT services industry, Indian companies are in the top 10 in the world. We are focused on one particular business model. Okay? In that business model, Indian companies are the most profitable. If you look at the profitability of Accenture, it's about, operating profit is about 15%. TCS and Infosys is 22 to 23%, far ahead of Accenture. And why am I using that number? Because ultimately, somebody is willing to pay for that profit continuously. And that's the strength of the business model. Another example of the strength of the business model is the entire world has shifted to this model of software development, which means that by and large, the largest amount of IT development activity for organizations around the world is happening in India. That means they have actually adopted our model, okay, of doing software development. So we have taken a segment, and in that segment we have become better than anybody else. So I will not accept the term that we are, at the bottom or anything like that. Actually, we are right at the top. Market cap TCS now, I believe, exceeds Accenture. So I will not accept that. Now, there are product companies which are emerging. Soho is an example, Freshdesk is an example. See, that business model is different. So you need to invest upfront in R&D. You have to invest significant amount of money in branding and marketing. And these can be done only with venture funding. When the IT industry started, there was no venture funding. We had to bootstrap. Banks were not willing to give loans to the industry. So we chose one which suited our strength. And we became the best in the world in doing that. So that's how I look at it.
You said that, hello here.
Ah.
You said that the funding should come from private sectors to educational and research institutes. What is the current scenario in that? Is there any progress, or what is the way in which we should go about it?
So we have to all talk about it. We have to create a climate of opinion. We have to create examples. We have to. It's something that we have to all do. I believe it will happen over time. The reason why I say this is, again, my personal experience. I started working with IIT Madras. This was mentioned in 1999. Hardly we raised any money from alumni for the institute, private sources, quote unquote. Last year, IIT Madras raised 73 crores. Okay, it took us 19 years to get there, but now it will become easier and easier. We have created a culture and a climate. The alumni is competing against each other. Which batch is contributing more? Right? So we have created a culture of giving back to IIT Madras. Other IITs are also doing the similar things. So we have to do it. So I believe that this is not just one side working at it. Actually, it's both sides working together, or all of us working together. So, for example, if you look at TIFR, you have to reach out. You have to explain your work. You have to go and meet the industry. You have to go and meet the philanthropists, and continue to do that. You will not get results immediately. Right? And I, in every platform that I get, tell my friends from industry, 0.2% is contributed by private sector in India, 0.6% by government. If you have to go to 3%, you better actually increase your spending from 0.2 to 1.5 or 1.8 or 2%. It's something you have to do if India has to progress. See, if we now need to develop as a economy, it has to be on top of knowledge and IP we build, which will primarily come from the research and innovations that we create. So it is necessary.
Yeah.
I think many hands are there.
Yeah.
Somebody is.
With this proposed restriction in entry into USA, how do you think it's going to affect America? They talk about it, and how it's more importantly going to be advantageous to our country comparatively?
See, this is something that is happening in many parts of the world, not just in the US. And there is fear of job losses. I believe job losses are happening because of the accelerating change in technology, and because of that accelerating change in the nature of jobs. Several categories of jobs are better done by machines, and hence it will get done by machines. So that is a bigger cause of job loss than immigration or migration and things like that. But having said that, the problem is, in this technology transition, we have no mechanism to retrain people, or the mechanism to retrain people is poor. So people are affected, which is the reality. And so we have to go through this transition. I believe, if you look at real data, there are, I think, 600,000 unfulfilled IT jobs in the US. 600,000 unfulfilled IT jobs. There is a similar number for Germany. Not 600,000, but there's a large number in Germany, unfulfilled IT jobs. So, that's the reality, but, politics plays a role here. So we have to work with it. Having said that, this will affect India also. Our 4 million IT professionals will have to be retrained to newer technologies. So, from example, if they have learned languages like C or Java, they have to be taught Python and things like that. They have to be taught AI, ML. They have to be taught data sciences, things like that. So they have to be also retrained. So otherwise, we will also face challenges in India, and there will be other problems in India. I don't know who has the microphone. Yeah. Okay. Here and here, actually. Yeah, go ahead.
Exactly the same ML and AI technology, will it actually eat up the IT sector jobs of India, especially at the lower levels?
Yeah, see, I again do not want to characterize lower and higher levels, okay? Every type of job to me is important, and every type of job has, can be done better, can be done more efficiently. That is what we need to look at. And if something needs to be done, it has to be done. We cannot characterize a job as higher or lower. Okay? The reason why I say this is, we have to change our mindset about jobs. Imagine if this auditorium is not cleaned. Will you be able to do this conference here? So is it a higher job or a lower job? Better than your job? Better than my job? Right? Every job is important. So, I strongly, believe that we shouldn't categorize jobs. What we should look at is, can it be done more efficiently? Can it be done better quality? So, cleaning up this auditorium, can it be done better? If it can be done better and more efficiently, we must equip that person or the team to use those tools. Exactly, that's what is happening in the IT industry. So testing, for example, is getting automated. Infrastructure management or data center management is getting automated. Because there's repetitive tasks, it's 7/24, it affects people's lives, they can't sleep because they have night shift. Better done by machines, more efficient way of doing things. So that is how we need to look at jobs. And this evolution will continue. When I studied and wrote my project report, I wrote on paper, took it to a typist, got it typed. Then he has to make a modification. That page will have to be retyped, etc., etc. Today, we just use a computer. There's nobody called typist, and we can produce much better reports, project reports. And so, with change in technology, every single job will get affected. And what we need to do is look at every job and find out which is the best way to do it, which is the most efficient way to do it, which tool is best to use. And if we're smart, we will change every single job.
Paritosh, you.
So, Mr. Gopalakrishnan, much has been said about synergy between science and technology. But there are also tensions. The aim of technology is to apply knowledge to accomplish missions, generate value, maybe make life better, earn money. Knowledge is done for its joy, maybe to get fame, and there is this sense of, advancement in knowledge with scientists. Now, when your resources are low, when your manpower is low, when your baseline is low, you have to choose where you are going to put, your activity. And what are your thoughts for a country like India? Where should it be focusing?
Yeah, so that is what politicians are doing. That's what the government is doing. It's our job to actually advocate that there should be investment in science and technology. Children, for example, their demand on parents is very high, and there will be competition between one child and a second child, right? And parents try to be fair, but then whoever cries the loudest will get the candy. We all know that, right? So we have to do what we have to do. It's somebody else who's trying to balance the budget and all that stuff. That's all. But ultimately, all of this are important for a country like India. We need to look at short term, today's problem. We need to look at the future. Investment in medicine, right? So you can help somebody in the hospital today, but you can eliminate diseases. Both are required. Yes.
I want to know what are your thoughts about, with this increased use of AI, there's also this concern about privacy violation. How much of technology is good, especially with, with so many apps coming in, with youngsters using so much of, technology. There's also a debate about whether it should be regulated, What is your take on it?
So, what is the latest tool of terrorist? A car or a truck. Most of the recent incidents of terrorism is using a car or a truck. Now, do we ban cars or trucks? No. So every technology can be misused. AI and ML will also be misused. I have no doubt about it. So we need to figure out what is the right set of regulations. We need to also understand how it can be misused so that we can take remedial measures and things like that. This is an ongoing battle. Okay, every single technology can be misused. And so we need to, as a society, as a government, as scientists, we need to actually think about these things. And to some extent, that was what I was alluding to in my talk. This is something we have to be aware, and we have to work at it, and we have to make sure that what we do, by and large, helps society. We cannot completely eliminate the bad effects.
What is your opinion? Here.
Yeah.
What is your opinion as to where does India stand as far as advancements in science and technology are concerned, and its synthesis with the provision of basic health care?
So, that's a big area of discussion, because see, basic healthcare starts with access, affordability, the number of doctors available. It's just not science and technology, right? So there are lots of basic things that need to be covered before we get to science and technology. Having said that, I strongly believe that given that a lot of modern science is going to be driven by data, especially in healthcare. A doctor will be now able to take the patient's data, compare with every other patient data that's available in a database, find the exact match, find what has worked in that patient and apply it to this patient. So data is going to, AI, machine learning, search, etc., is going to become integral to how healthcare is going to be delivered. Similarly, with the advancements that are happening, we will be able to predict an incident much earlier than it will happen, again using data. So should we not apply those to our people, bring those benefits to our people? I believe strongly yes. It will reduce cost, which will again benefit our country. Now, if we don't participate in this research, as I said, that's why a lot of the things I covered was AI and ML. If Indian data, 1.3 billion people's data is not available in the research database that's coming up with these solutions, the cures, it may not work for India. So we have to be there. We have to participate in that research. Yeah.
Yeah, you had an interesting comparison or the statistics of the top 5 industries in 60s and top 5 industries in 2017. The two companies that struck out were Amazon and Facebook among the top 5, and IBM and AT&T in 60s. Now this Amazon and Facebook are not known for doing any R&D. They're using technology and the information to be in the business. So maybe my information may not be complete.
Yeah.
But my question is
yeah.
that knowledge is required for furthering the advancement of, or the betterment of the human life. So overall, that's where the funding in R&D in the greenfield or the blue sky research goes. So what's the statistics on that compared to 60s and 2010, where overall the funding for the basic research, how does that compare?
So I don't have immediate, but let me just talk about Facebook and Amazon. They do invest significant amount of money in research into how they actually identify likes and dislikes, how they create recommendation engines. So if you go into Facebook now, it will tell you, based on the information that it has, these are people you should probably connect with because they have studied in your same college, they've studied in your same school, they eat vegetarian food, they shop at this place. It knows everything about all this, that whole graph algorithms, etc., have all developed using research. They're buying this from research labs, buying people from these research labs. So they're definitely investing in people and research. Okay, Amazon, their warehouses are completely automated. There are no human beings in that. They invest heavily into robotics and things like that to make sure that it's the most efficient warehouse that there is. Maybe this applied research, but may not be basic research. But they're also investing in basic research from a future perspective to come out with new businesses. Space research. Strangely enough, Amazon is investing in space research. Okay, maybe that's the future of delivery of packages dropped from space. I don't, but that's how they think. That is how they think. So, I strongly believe that any company, if they want to maintain and sustain their leadership over long periods of time, they will have to invest in research and innovation. They cannot sustain their position in today's competitive world without investment into research and innovation. And if they are not, they will not, when we look at 2028, they will not be there. There.
Perhaps the last.
So,
okay, go ahead. You have the microphone. Yeah.
So
and the last question here. So 2 questions.
No. Last 2 questions. Sorry.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
okay. So with the increased use of AI, maybe for a developed economies, it is a greater acceptance because they have a aging population. But how do you see in case of a developing economy like India? Like we have to not only use the AI, but we have to, because of the population growth and all that, we have to provide the jobs also. So with AI taking over some of the jobs, so where do we draw a line? The economic benefit may be there, but there may be a social impact.
Yeah, but if you look at China, they've transitioned into a manufacturing economy from an agrarian economy, but now they're actually transitioning out of a manufacturing economy because as the standard of living increases, people don't want to do factory jobs anymore. Okay, but the India's problem is more complex than that because of the size of the country. 40% of our people still depend on agriculture. Okay, now they can't be retrained very quickly. The people who are doing manufacturing jobs is only, because India is 80% or maybe 70% services today, right? So we are actually a services-led economy. We are not a manufacturing-led economy. We are a services-led economy. But many of these services are delivery, construction, things like that. again, they can't actually progress to an IT job. For all the talk about IT and India's prowess in IT, only 4 million people work in IT. Only 4 million people, out of a workforce of about 600 million. Right? So our work is actually complex. The people who are affected by an AI and ML, some of these 4 million people, some of the white collar workers, which is the 10% formal workforce that we have. That's what is affected. AI and ML is not going to immediately affect the people in the farm or in the factory yet. So our problem is actually very complex, but we cannot stop progress. See, my key point is, societal development is very complex, but we need to look at multiple solutions to transition. So we should now focus on services-led jobs rather than manufacturing-led jobs, because manufacturing, if you create a factory here, if that business has to be competitive, they have to use robots. Our citizens will demand cost-effective products, cost-competitive products. Otherwise, we will have to import those products because those products will be cheaper. So we cannot actually, even if we tried not to use robots, we will not be able to, because it will not be productive and competitive. So it's very complex actually, I believe. I'm not an economist, but my simple thinking, it's actually very complex, and not using automation, not using AI, ML, etc. is not the solution. It's about actually transitioning as quickly as possible, retraining, reskilling, create the necessary jobs. Creating necessary jobs means investments, ease of doing business, things like that, which government is aware, I think they're looking at it, but we need to get there faster. I think last question, right? Yeah.
So I was wondering, given that AI and with machine learning, it's only as good as the sort of data that you feed in, given that there are existent inequities, biases in the data that's fed in, is it not only going to serve to amplify biases? For example, let's say something like face recognition, etc., based on the nature of data, gender, race, creed, color, background. I mean, how is this going to eventually play out in terms of taking biases that exist in society and amplifying them? And what are your thoughts on that?
This is an excellent opportunity for research scientists. How can you work with a small sample and create better outcomes? So thank you very much.
Yeah. So please, could you sit for a while? So please sit for a while we thank our speaker. So it's been an absolute pleasure, Mr. Gopalakrishnan. We are extremely delighted and very, very grateful that you took time out. And it was just a very hesitant suggestion, could you find time to come to TIFR to give this talk? And we were amazed by the enthusiasm that you showed for coming here. And I think over the last 1 hour, we've seen totally new perspectives. We have a certain perspective on science, mostly in this institute, and we're always saying that India is not doing enough for science. It's true, but you're probably telling us that we are not doing enough ourselves to find things which are there, probably which we can access, and that's been your message throughout the day. And it's, I think, an extremely important message that you have given. And it's also a pleasure to see the passion with which you speak on these issues and the pride you take in India's achievements and how things are progressing. And I think that's a great inspiration. And we can't thank you enough, but, well, thank you very much for coming here and giving this wonderful talk. And maybe you still have a few minutes, so at the tea, people can continue to fire questions at Chris at the tea break outside. And you'll